Hi, Julie here from Copy What I Use for Teenage Anxiety. And in today's video, we're going to cover teenage OCD and in particular, how to spot the symptoms your child may have teenage OCD. And secondly, how to know whether it is actually OCD or just behavioural habits that they might just have. Okay, so for the first part, we're going to cover how to know the symptoms and how to spot them. Sadly, they're not always easy to spot at the time, and sadly in our case it had gone far too far before we actually realised how bad she had the OCD. Because when I look back now, there were a few telltale signs, such as she started sleeping with a hoodie. Then that developed, then she was actually putting a hood up to go to sleep as well as wearing a hoodie to bed. We now realise that was a process of trying to cover herself up to stop herself becoming contaminated. Then that progressed to her needing to use wipes. We noticed this actually coincidentally around a time when she went off to a summer camp. And we had just put it down to that she was afraid that the beds or something they was going to get dirty. And some of her friends were displaying the same behaviour. So we thought, oh, maybe it's a teenage thing. However, what we've now realised is that she had actually persuaded her friends to start sleeping in hoodies, wrongly making them think the camp might be dirty. So of course we saw no significance to it. But when we realised things were bad was when those others, when they came back from the camp, were perfectly normal and resumed their normal life. For us and our daughter, she didn't actually resume a normal life. What she did was it progressively got worse. She carried on sleeping in a hoodie with her hood up. All her legs had to be covered up. She would then have to wipe everything down. She had wipes. That progressed then from ordinary wipes weren't enough. It progressed to medical wipes being needed. And from that then, it progressed that she needed sprays to actually spray everything down and hand sanitizer. And her hands became really, really bad as a consequence. And it just got into a vicious cycle then that the wipes increased, the wiping down increased, and her covering up increased. And it just got out of hand before we even realised. But as I say, my advice would be this: if you notice your child doing something different, out of the ordinary, and they can't sort of function without doing that thing, and it gets progressively worse, i.e. you're noticing they're using wipes, or they might be covering their bodies up, or just doing something repetitively that becomes a bit of a compulsion rather than a norm, then I would urge you to seek medical help, because obviously there could be teenage OCD starting, and the earlier you catch it, the better. Okay, so then on to the second question. You might think, well, hang about, my child does things like needs to check the straighteners are switched off or the cooker's switched off. How do I know whether they've got teenage OCD? Well, you don't really know, because that obviously could be the start of them developing child OCD. But when it's proper OCD, clinical or chronic OCD, the child won't be able to function without doing those rituals, i.e. it won't be just once. They'd have to keep doing it until they're actually convinced that it's been done enough to leave the house. And that can sometimes make them half an hour late, or in some cases with our daughter, she didn't turn up in school at all, because after she'd done these rituals, then she had to go into the shower then, and it just became a vicious circle. It just took so long that she ended up getting so stressed and worn out she'd stay off. So basically it's when they can't function or can't go out without having to do those rituals. The second thing would be that it becomes a very isolated life very often with OCD. In most cases, it leads to agoraphobia. In our daughter's case, we were fortunate she did continue to go out, but obviously then rituals had to be done when she came back in. So often she would put off going out because it was often easier to stay in and less exhausting just to stay in. And it also becomes that once they get too bad, they don't want other people, not even family members, in the house. So it actually becomes an isolated experience for the rest of the family as well. Okay, the third thing is obviously school attendance can go down, and especially if books become contaminated and they can't come in the house, it becomes a real issue and a real problem. And we were lucky again, somehow she walked away with all A stars despite all these constraints that she had. And A's, it was A stars and A's she walked away with, but it was a very traumatic and difficult experience, and it took her about 3 times the time to revise, especially as some of her books became contaminated as well. Number 4, it actually affects the whole family. You will become very quickly into a war zone area where everybody will be shouting at each other. The OCD child will be shouting in frustration and fear of the bad things they think is going to happen if they don't carry out these rituals. The rest of the family end up shouting and on edge and tense because we're afraid of the repercussions, the more things are going to become contaminated. And as a result, the whole family become recruited, because that's what OCD does, it recruits others. And you all ended up doing these rituals in order just to calm and pacify your child. I mean, at the time, you think you're doing your best for the child, because let's be honest, we all want to make our child feel happy and safe in the world. But inadvertently, what we were doing was actually making the problem a whole lot worse till it got completely out of control, and wasn't just controlling her, but controlling the whole family. So in summary, what I would say is this. Yes, a lot of children will display rituals and, what can you call them, superstitions, things they like to do to just feel better going out. But when it's real OCD, they will not be able to function or go out without carrying out those rituals, and sometimes not just once, but several times. All the family will become recruited, and you'll all end up having to do some bizarre rituals just to keep the person calm. You'll become very isolated because, as I say, sometimes people are banned from the house because they're seen as unsafe coming in case they contaminate the house. And it's basically when behaviour is anything other than normal, and lots of people won't get this behaviour. The times I've been accused that my daughter's a diva or she's spoilt, when sadly people don't realise that I'm not sort of chauffeuring around in the car where she's in the back. Sometimes it's just when no other seat feels safe to her, and that's why she's sitting in the back, because that's the only part of the car she feels safe in. So hope today's video on teenage OCD and anxiety has helped in some way. If it has, please pop a comment in the bottom, because it's always nice to know I'm sharing useful information. Again, I'm going to put the link to my Greedy Monster Facebook group in the bottom, because my goal is to try and get as many people into the group as possible so we as parents can share tips and advice on teenage OCD and anxiety. And I'll also pop a link to a blog that I've written on this subject as well, in case you actually want to read the blog in written form as well. Okay, so that's it for now. Till the next video.